All right, let's talk a little bit more about this term I keep using, and I've used it this week and last week and even the very first week, the notion of competitive advantage. As I said before, competitive advantage is the result of how you use the resources of an organization bundled together to create organizational capabilities. In other words, I have a series of resources. They may be people, they may be technology, they may be capital or access to capital, they may be the infrastructure of the company in terms of manufacturing capabilities and the like. And all of these are organizational resources. When they're put together, they become organizational capabilities. You piece them together in a way that generates capabilities. And some of these are tangible and some of them are intangible. Just to be clear before I move on, tangible resources are assets that can be observed and quantified. That is, things like financial resources. We know that tangible resources are the amount of capital available. I can quantify that. Physical resources like access to raw materials, those would be tangible. Intangible resources are those things that often differentiate a company, but they're harder to measure. Human resources, innovative resources like ideas, the capacity to innovate, and then reputational resources like the reputation of the company in the marketplace. So before I jump down, I just want to make that clear. Those come together, those resources, when they're bundled together to be capabilities, organizational capabilities of the company. And it's those organizational capabilities, those bundled resources, that are the source of a firm's core competencies and the basis for a firm to be competitively advantaged, to have a competitive advantage. It's how you intentionally, or as the book says, purposely integrate those capabilities to achieve specific tasks or set of tasks that are designed to set you apart in the marketplace. Core competencies are capabilities that serve as a source of competitive advantage for a firm over its rivals. So you have this series of core competencies that you that grow from your capabilities, which are your bundled resources, and they allow you, when you put them together in the right way, to create an advantage over your competitors. And these are what distinguish one company from another. It's as the book said, the personality of the company. It's the thing. Again, if we use Apple as the continuing theme, it's the cool factor. It's the customer service profile. These are things that are both driven in part by tangible resources like the ability to use new technology that they have in their stock, in their portfolio of technology, but it's also focus on innovation. It's a focus on human resources. It's a focus on reputation. The cool factor is clearly reputational. It's what differentiates Apple from its competitors. And again, as I said, tangible resources are assets that can be seen, touched, and quantified. I'm not going to go through this again. And intangible resources, here's the full presentation. It just seemed like it made more sense a second ago to kind of cover that in a little bit detail as we were talking. Let's go on to the next topic, which is core competencies, the criteria for competitive advantage and value chain analysis. So now that we kind of understand what a core competency is, how do we conduct, first, how do we determine whether we have competitive advantage, and how do we conduct a value chain analysis to measure it? There are four areas or four criteria, I should say, of sustainable competitive advantage. And those are when a company has capabilities that are valuable, that is, they truly are differentiated on the value of the capability. It may be that you have PhDs with a rare skill set that nobody else can afford to get. it could be rare, and there's an overlap amongst these. The value of something and its rarity are often intertwined. It could be costly to imitate, and all three of those are essentially, with the fourth, non-substitutable capabilities. All four are intertwined, but essentially if you've got something that's valuable, rare, costly to imitate, and non-substitutable, you have a greater probability that if you put the pieces together correctly, your competitive advantage will be sustainable in comparison to your competitors. On the other hand, if you don't have capabilities that fit into these four criteria, then essentially your capabilities may be somewhat less valuable, somewhat less rare, easier to imitate, something that others could substitute, and then they yield competitive parity with others, and that at most could provide you with a temporary or sustainable competitive advantage, depending on how much the parity is. If it's basically dead even, it's very hard for you to have a strong-term competitive advantage. The performance implications of what I just said is that parity equals average returns, and temporary advantage equals average to above average returns. Sustainable advantage means above average returns. Remember, at the outset of the course, we talked about competitive advantage being tied to above average returns. If parity equals average returns, then you at best can have average, maybe above average for a short amount of time, returns, but in the long run you will be stuck at average returns if you don't have sustainable competitive advantage that's driven by capabilities that are either valuable, rare, costly to imitate, or non-substitutable. Let's talk a little bit about value chain analysis. Value chain analysis is the activity that a firm undertakes so that it can understand what portions of its operations create value and what portions of its operations don't. If you understand these issues, you're in a much better position to be able to decide what to keep and what to lose as you try to create value and create above average returns in terms of your strategy. If you have portions of your organization that are a drag on your overall returns, then you're not generating and a drag sufficiently to turn your overall returns to average returns, then you need to figure out how best to drive out the negative activities and look at those value creating activities, how you can increase the impact of those value creating activities. And so you look at two types of activities. First, primary activities, which are those activities which are involved with a product's physical creation, sales and distribution to buyers, and services after the sale. So this is service, marketing and sales, outbound, inbound, logistics, and operations. So these are the things you can regularly identify as this has to do with the product. It's obvious. Primary activities are always product specific. So again, using the Apple example, the Apple Store is right there in the middle of it. Production plants, right there in the middle of primary activities. Support activities are those activities that are provided as assistance for the necessary and are necessary for the primary activities to take place. Those include infrastructure, human resources management, technologies development, procurement, and they're important. I mean, procurement, if Apple is building an iPad and it needs copper, it needs to know how to procure that copper so that it can build the circuit boards it needs for its product. So support activities are not unimportant, but they don't tie directly to the product itself. Some of you may have looked at value chain analysis in other classes, but this is a pretty simple way to break it. Here's basically a good illustration of the value chain analysis that comes from the text. And as you can see, support activities really are those that kind of push up and support the margin of the business, and those include firm infrastructure, human resources, technology, and procurement. And then The primary activities are service, marketing and sales, outbound logistics, operations, and inbound logistics. And as you think about your organization, you need to decide, do I have the right human resources management model? Do I need to rethink it so that I can support value creation? Do I need to think about different technologies differently? Do I need to think about, in the primary areas, whether I'm providing the right service model or not to my customers to create value? So as you think about your companies, particularly in your team projects, you may want to apply a value chain analysis, particularly if there appear to be weaknesses in your company, and particularly weaknesses caused by one of these fundamental components, either on the support or the primary side.